It's not always what you wear that is important or is something that you remember. Sometimes it's what you don't wear that you regret. And this was a case where I thought if I had worn that. But anyway, so I put this pantsuit on because I'd been invited to a party. So, I was just in one of these moods, so I just put on this white lace pantsuit. And I thought, I'm going to wear that. It was a hot summer's day. And I walked up the steps and then walked into this room. And it was all white. I mean, the room was vast. It would be, sort of 1.5 times the size of this whole restaurant. Everything was white. All the walls were white, the same shag pile carpeting, and there were these enormous white leather cubed sofa kind of lounges all around the room. And that was it. Everyone else was just in black, except for these 3 guys I saw sitting at the far end on the sofas in white, and I thought, oh, thank goodness. And I just beeline straight over, and it was the Bee Gees. And I spent the whole rest of the party chatting and flirting away with the Bee Gees, who were desperate to have my white pantsuit because they were wearing something similar. So, it was one of those stories, one of those moments where I thought, oh my gosh, if I hadn't worn that white pantsuit, I would not have had this extraordinary story. I was just interviewed about which, among many other questions, what decade I love, and I said the 60s. And, when I started talking about it, I realized that, what's so great about the 60s for me is that it was all about empowering women in a very roundabout way, because suddenly you had a massive choice. So, like the beautiful collection we saw from Hell Bunny today, it was either the really, the wiggle kind of dress, and we saw some really beautiful slim one. And then, of course, you have the Dior look, like, the dress we have here, really fitted. But you didn't have too much choice. You had to kind of fit into that and maybe a couple of house coat kind of a thing. Suddenly, with the 60s, there was so much going on in the world with women. There were so many different looks that you could choose something that really personified your own personality for the first time, I think, in fashion history. Because up until then, it was all pretty regimented. You had to kind of fit in, and if you couldn't fit in, then you were shaped to fit in with your corsetry and things like that. So the 60s was really, and that I find that fascinating. And then, of course, it's just gone on from there.
So we've just finished our Darnell collection talk with Charlotte from the Blue Mountains. What is your favourite piece that you are showcasing here?
For today, I'd have to say it's the America Transu, which is the red typewriter dress. I just, love it because of the technology that was involved. I love the color. I love the fact that she's a young designer who's only just graduated from a fashion school in London. And I love the fact that she's shaken up the fashion world by doing something that no one has done before. So that's my favourite dress here. But I've got so many favourites back at the storage unit.
And what was your favourite part about being involved in the Southwest Fashion Festival this year?
Well, I think the best thing I've seen is how the standard has just skyrocketed. And, the venue where they hosted the fashion parades is brilliant. And it works really well with the models coming through. I think the caliber of what we're seeing has gone up enormously. I love seeing the students work, and you can see that they're learning some really important and interesting parts of fashion history. And certainly, some of the dresses we saw right at the end. I had a little bit of a My Fair Lady moment when the black and white one came out with that wonderful, very stiff, sort of peplum that came out, and then she had the fantastic hat. And I think that obviously the up-and-coming designers, that to me is very inspiring. I do a lot of work with students, and I mentor a lot of students. So when you see quality like that, that, I'm always saying that that the fashion industry in Australia is safe when you see that kind of quality coming out. And then, seeing Hell Bunny, how fantastic is that to think of a company that is incredibly popular on the other side of the world, and yet you can bring it here and it looks like it was made for here. And that to me is what's so interesting about fashion too, is that it doesn't matter where you live in the world. It just works.
So what would be your favourite piece out of your whole 9,000 plus collection?
Well, it changes, but at the moment I'm really fascinated by garments that tell stories about a particular decade or an era. And I've got a dress that was designed by Lucille, Lady Duff Gordon. And she did these dresses sort of, 1900s, 1910, and they were all called gowns of emotion. And you can imagine they were covered with, feminine bows, and they were pinks and pastel colors, and they were made of gossamer silks. They were absolutely stunning. And I've got 3 of them. What's interesting about them is that Lucille opened shops around the world, London, then Paris, then Chicago, New York. Then she actually survived the sinking of the Titanic. She, her husband, and her PA. But the sinking of the Titanic actually changed her career, I think, in a way, because she survived. They were saved. They were in the first lifeboat. The first lifeboat was meant to have taken 42 passengers, and there were only 24. And so she was actually taken to court by the American War Board, the American Transport Authority too, saying that she hampered the rescue of other possible Titanic survivors. So suddenly, she was being thrust into the limelight for a very nasty reason, instead of it all being about her fabulous gowns and things. And she then worked for, a number of years after that, but her gowns definitely changed. And so to me, I find that quite fascinating. It didn't sink with the Titanic, obviously, but I love the fact that, Rose Byrne, Australian Rose Byrne, she actually was portrayed Lucille in the Titanic movie. So her, as a person, was a very important part of that incredible moment in the world history. So I find that fascinating to think that I've got a piece of a dress that, I can tell stories like that, and it's still something about fashion, and it's still something about a very important designer in the world, and I've got 3 of her dresses.
You're very, very, very lucky. Thank you so much for your time. I know that you're probably very eager to go and get ready for tonight's extravaganza.
Yeah. And I'm not involved, so that means I can, relax.
You're off duty.
Yeah, I'm off duty, yeah.
Thank you so much for your time, Charlotte, and hopefully we'll see you again next year.
Thank you very much.